Ashes in the Huron River is the second full-length album from Theophonos. This is the artist behind Serpent Column, and after 3 albums and 3 EPs over the course of just a few years, they shuttered that project and started this one, and have focused a little bit more on the experimental and, I would say, post-hardcore, metalcore, and mathcore tinged side of that. But they have other designs, as we see on this album, that take that avant-garde style and mash it around a bit and do some interesting things with it. If you're not familiar with Serpent Column, I think that is very important provenance to understand the guitar language of this individual, how over the top they had been in the past, the very idiosyncratic and dense presentation style, the self-produced production values, and the streaks of chaotic hardcore and dissonant death metal and black metal that sort of defined that band for a very intense set of releases, one after another. All of them fairly notable. I think for me, the first 2 albums and first 2 EPs were probably the strongest material from Serpent Column looking back, although I did appreciate most of the other material, as chaotic and kind of insane and unreal as it was. This is meant to be more of a personal project, and one that deals with maybe more personalized lyrics. It says a bit more about the artist himself, and basically it's a change in focus entirely. So let's just cut to a song here to see what is the same and what is also different. So to be fair, Nightmare Visions felt like something new, certainly, but it did feel like it was just a little bit more of a straightforward, maybe metallic hardcore influenced version of Serpent Column. Maybe songs that had been written in previous but scrapped, or it felt like it was a remnant of moving on, and it was sort of the farewell to a lot of the ticks that Serpent Column enjoyed, without all of the pure chaos and face melting speed of it all. So it was a good record. I reviewed it positively. I think my score was about equally as high for this one, and it made it onto my top albums of 2023 because I felt like it was something refreshing from the artist. I think that I was always interested in something that was a little bit more personal, because this was obviously a very passionate artist, and also one with a dark nihilistic streak. And I think that a lot of these aspects come across a little bit more earnestly on the Theophonos material as we look at the lyrics and the style played. I feel like this is a much more natural progression of where he was going early on, and with this style, which is much more hardcore influenced up front. And I'll say that the first half of the album does have that kind of converged meets avant-garde black metal feeling. There's a little bit of a Thantafaxath style sound. We're not exactly getting a botch record or a Zao record, if you know the difference between those two things. Ultimately, what we have is a container that makes sense at all times from an artist who is clearly capable of all sorts of avant-garde and unexpected and rarely repeated strands of ideas. So what we get here is maybe a slowing down and a focus on delivering songs which are a little bit more accessible, readable, and maybe more enjoyable in terms of stirring up a lot of chaos and chaotic feelings, but also not being such a typewriter about it, and delivering something that is memorable or eventful without moving on from the ideas too quickly. It doesn't feel like such a competition to rush through, and they still find a way to create these exaggerated pieces that are pretty impressive, but we also get some very tuneful moments. We get some very sentimental moments halfway through the album, and ultimately, the record builds towards some very surprising songs along the way. And I think that really arrives in the second half. The first half feels like it works up to an elegy, and then the rest of the record takes a little bit more of a black metal turn, a little bit, but also a post black metal turn in some ways. And it's hard to generalize with a band like this, but something has changed. There's an air of devastation, of cataclysm, of whatever the cover art is depicting is sort of has played out at that point, and we reached a dramatic peak of the record. And I found that it's still confrontational music, but it feels like there's some feeling to it here in the second half of the record. And I like the way that builds and has a couple of peaks along the way in those last 4 or 5 songs on the record. So overall, I think this is a better listen, a more complete album, and maybe just a slightly more mature release from the artist that has a lot of focus to it. And I say it a couple times in the review. I don't think that I felt maybe not like not so much like the artist has pulled back to like Arnuthi Thalassa back in 2017, but there's a real focus that every note counts or every movement has a purpose or there's enough repetition in there so that these things stick in my head a little bit more and say something. That said, I don't have the lyrics and I can't really get into that part of it. So my experience was kind of strange in that I could tell something was going on here, but I'll have to ask what it's all about until I get the lyrics in hand. Luckily, the record comes out in just tomorrow on February 9th. And you can listen to it probably premiered or it'll be out tomorrow. And you can check out some of the songs on the site as well as read my review if you feel like it. I feel like this has very strong immersive qualities. It's easy to connect with for me. If you don't like elements of hardcore and metalcore, they're not stupid, but that'll have to be up to your taste. And I'm not sure what the lasting value of this record. I think I could bump it up a little bit higher over time because of the way that Nightmare Visions matured over time, but that remains to be seen. So otherwise, I think it's an easy recommendation. Otherwise.